My name is Louise, and I am 31 years old. I will never forget the day my body betrayed me. One moment, I was standing determined to walk away from the humiliation my brother had just thrown in my face. The next moment, I was on the cold concrete, staring at the sky, my legs refusing to move. It felt like time cracked open, freezing me in a nightmare I could not wake from. Jason, my older brother, stood above me. His laugh cut into the air, sharp and cruel. He thought this was hilarious. To him, I was always the joke, the clumsy sister, the one to mock. But this was different. My spine screamed, my chest heaved, yet nothing below my waist responded. "Walk it off," my father barked from the grill, his voice dripping with irritation. To him, pain was weakness. His 6'2" frame towered with authority, and in his eyes I was simply being dramatic. "Stop ruining the party," my mother hissed, adjusting her blouse nervously while her friends looked on. She accused me of making Jason's 31st birthday about myself, of being jealous yet again. Jealous. At that moment, I could not feel my own legs. My vision blurred. The sound of Jason's friends laughing in the background twisted into something monstrous. They watched me struggle, some curious, some uncomfortable, but no one stepped forward. Lying there, a terrifying realization gripped me. This wasn't just another prank gone wrong. This was the moment everything would change. My father's dismissal, my mother's accusations, Jason's mockery. Together they weren't just ignoring me, they were crossing a line into something criminal. And here's the truth. I was not just fighting for breath, I was fighting for recognition. For years, my voice had been silenced, my experiences erased by those who should have loved me most. But in this moment, as I stared up at the clear blue sky, I knew one thing with chilling certainty. Their betrayal would finally come with consequences. This is the story of how a cruel prank left me paralyzed, of how my family's refusal to believe me turned from neglect into negligence, and of how I found strength not only to survive but to rise. Before I take you deeper into what really happened, let me whisper something directly to you. If you have ever had your pain dismissed, if your suffering has ever been brushed aside by those who should have protected you, I want you to stay with me. Share where you are watching from, and let this be more than just my story. Together we build a place where every voice is heard. Because what happened next proves that sometimes silence is not just cruelty, it is a crime. My name is Louise, and in that moment on the ground, I realized something terrifying. My family saw me as nothing more than a nuisance. My legs refused to respond. Panic rushed through me, but instead of help, I was met with laughter, irritation, and accusations. Jason's grin told me everything he believed this was just another of his jokes. My father's scowl confirmed his disdain. Pain was weakness, and weakness was shame. And my mother. Her whisper was sharper than the pain in my spine. "You're ruining your brother's party." But I need to take you back, to explain why this reaction wasn't a surprise, why it was the final act in a lifetime of betrayal. Because the Matthews household was not what it looked like from the outside. We lived in a polished suburb in Massachusetts. Our house was perfect, our yard manicured, our family portraits picture-ready. My father, Douglas, was a respected accountant who towered in silence more than 6 feet tall. My mother, Eleanor, was the model homemaker, always smiling, always careful to keep up appearances. And Jason was the golden child, athletic, charming, the boy who could do no wrong. Me, I was the shadow, the one told to toughen up, the one dismissed when I fell, ignored when I cried, belittled when I spoke. My father's mantra was etched into me like a scar. "Toughen up, Louise." When I scraped my knee, when I coughed with fever, when my heart broke, he said the same words. To him, my pain was drama. To my mother, acknowledging my pain meant breaking the delicate balance of our household, so she turned away. And Jason, he knew this. He learned early that he could hurt me and walk away smiling. When I was 7, he shoved me off my bike. My wrist broke. He said I fell on my own. They believed him. At the hospital, my father scolded me for being careless, while my mother fretted about medical bills. No one asked if Jason had lied, and that was only the beginning. At 12, Jason locked me in the basement during a thunderstorm, knowing I feared the dark. I screamed for hours. When I told my parents, they shook their heads. "You're making things up for attention." At 16, he destroyed my science project the night before it was due. I failed, and my parents told me it was my fault for waiting until the last minute. This was the pattern. Jason tormented me. My parents excused him, and I became invisible in my own home. I grew up believing my suffering was insignificant, my words meaningless. And the saddest part, some days I believed them. Some days I convinced myself maybe I was dramatic, maybe I was weak. But lying on that concrete years later with no feeling in my legs, I knew the truth. This wasn't weakness. This wasn't exaggeration. Something inside me was broken, and if no one helped, I would never walk again. So, before I go further, I want to pause for you. Because maybe you've been here too, not on the ground after a fall, but silenced by the very people who should have protected you. If you've ever felt invisible in your own family, if your pain was brushed aside as drama, I want you to tell me in the comments. Not for me, for you. Your story matters. And when you share, you remind someone else that they are not alone. This is more than my story. This is about what happens when cruelty is disguised as love, when appearances matter more than truth, when silence becomes complicity. And what happened to me at Jason's birthday party was the breaking point. The moment when years of denial collided with reality so sharp, so brutal, it forced the world to finally see what I had always known. Because what came next would not just expose Jason's cruelty, it would reveal my parents' neglect for what it really was, a crime. Growing up in the Matthews house felt like walking across glass barefoot. From the outside, our life looked polished, enviable even. Inside, every step risked cutting deep. My father's voice dominated my mother's silence, suffocated, and Jason's grin made me feel like prey in my own home. Douglas Matthews, my father, was a man carved out of stone. 6 feet, 2 shoulders, broad eyes that pierced without words. To him, emotion was weakness, and weakness had no place under his roof. He carried the lessons of a military father who believed pain was simply weakness, leaving the body. He passed that belief on to Jason, shaping him into a mirror of cruelty, wrapped in charm. Eleanor, my mother, was the opposite. Nervous, fragile, a woman who tiptoed around my father's moods. She sometimes tried to nurture me an extra blanket, a soft word, but it was always fleeting. When it came to choosing between peace in the household or protecting me, she chose peace, every time. Her loyalty wasn't to me, it was to the family's image. Jason thrived in this environment. He was 3 years older, athletic, and dangerously charismatic. To outsiders, he was golden. At school, teachers adored him. At home, my parents worshipped him. He learned early that he could do anything, lie, cheat, hurt, and they would protect him. He wore their favoritism like armor, and he wielded it against me. I still remember being 7 years old. Jason pushed me off my bike on the cracked driveway. My wrist snapped under my weight. I screamed for help. He told my parents I fell because I was clumsy. They believed him. My father scolded me for being careless. My mother worried about the hospital bill. Not one word was spoken about Jason's role. Not 1 ounce of doubt in his story. I learned a lesson that day, not about balance on a bike, but about balance in our family. Jason always stood tall. I was always the one on the ground. At 12, during a thunderstorm, Jason locked me in the basement. He knew I was terrified of the dark, that lightning made me panic. I banged on the door until my hands were raw. Hours passed before he let me out smirking. When I told my parents, they rolled their eyes. "Stop making up stories, Louise. Your brother would never." My voice was invisible, erased before it even left my mouth. By 16, the cruelty had become predictable. Jason ruined my science project the night before it was due. Months of work destroyed. I failed. When I told my parents, they didn't even look up from their evening coffee. "You should have been more prepared. You always procrastinate." His sabotage became my flaw. His violence became my weakness. This was my reality. My father's mantra, "Toughen up, Louise." My mother's whispered comparisons, "Your brother would never complain." and Jason's laughter echoing in every room, every wound, every silence. I carried these memories like invisible bruises. They shaped the way I moved through the world. They taught me not to trust my own perception. They made me question whether my pain was real. And that doubt, that erosion of self, was more damaging than any broken bone. When I left home at 18 for college, I thought I had escaped, but guilt and obligation tied me back. Holidays, birthdays, family events, they pulled me into the orbit of dysfunction I swore I had left behind. That is how I ended up at Jason's 31st birthday party. The cycle always found a way to repeat itself. Now let me ask you something, because maybe you've lived this too. Have you ever been compared to someone in your own family, always coming up short, no matter what you did? If you know what it feels like to be the scapegoat while someone else is crowned golden, share it in the comments. Your words could be the mirror someone else needs to realize they're not alone. Because my story, my paralysis, didn't begin the day I fell on that deck. It began years earlier in those moments of silence when cruelty was excused and lies became truth. And at Jason's birthday party, all of it would come crashing down in the most violent way possible. By the time I reached adulthood, I had learned a cruel survival skill: silence. Speaking up never worked. Protesting only made me the villain. So I swallowed my pain, tucked it away, and convinced myself that distance was safety. At 18, I packed my bags for college 2 states away. The air felt different that first night in my dorm, lighter, freer. No one scolded me for being dramatic when I coughed. No one mocked me for crying after a breakup. For the first time, I had friends who actually cared when I said I was hurting. I studied to become an elementary school teacher. Every day in class reminded me that compassion mattered, that children deserved to be believed. I promised myself I would never dismiss a student the way my parents dismissed me. Therapy became another lifeline. Sitting in that quiet office, a therapist helped me unravel years of lies. She taught me deep breathing visualization, how to separate my father's voice from my own. For the first time, I began to trust myself. I began to believe that my pain was real, that I mattered. But family ties, they are chains you cannot cut so easily. Holidays came with guilt-laden phone calls. My mother's trembling voice asking why I couldn't just come home. My father's sharp commands disguised as invitations. "It's your duty," he'd say. Jason's milestones became mine, to attend graduations, new jobs, and now his 31st birthday. I resisted. I told myself I had no reason to go. But my mother knew where to press. "It would mean so much to your brother if you came." The irony stung. Jason never cared whether I was there, but I had run out of excuses. And a part of me, a fragile, foolish part, still hoped maybe things had changed. Maybe years apart had softened them. Maybe this time I would not be the scapegoat. "Fine," I told her, my voice tight. "I'll be there." She exhaled like she had just won a battle. Wonderful. And Louise dressed nicely. You know how important appearances are to your father. It was a blade disguised as advice. My wardrobe had shifted over the years. Gone were the preppy, polished clothes my parents approved of. I had embraced comfort, casual jeans, and soft blouses that felt like me. To them, it was rebellion. To me, it was freedom. And yet with that single reminder, she pulled me back under their control. I hung up already, regretting my decision. But I made a plan. I would go. I would smile. I would hand Jason a generic birthday card with cash inside. I would leave as soon as it was polite. One afternoon of discomfort in exchange for several months of peace. What I didn't know was that this would be the last time I ever walked without assistance. That the patterns of cruelty I had endured for years would explode into something irreversible. That my parents' refusal to take my pain seriously would finally cross the line from neglect to criminal negligence. On the morning of the party, I packed an overnight bag not for their house but for a hotel. A small boundary, but important. My childhood bedroom was no longer mine, and I would not step into it again. I chose an outfit: carefully dark jeans, a blue blouse, flats. Respectable enough for my father's critical eye, comfortable enough to still feel like me. The drive took 2 hours. I practiced breathing exercises, repeated affirmations my therapist had drilled into me. You are an adult. You have the power to leave. You are not that child anymore. but all the therapy in the world could not prepare me for what awaited. Because what happened at Jason's party wasn't just another cruel joke. It was the culmination of decades of silence. And when I stepped into that backyard, I walked straight into the final act of a tragedy that had been writing itself my entire life. There is a question I carry, and I want to ask you too. Have you ever gone back to a place or person hoping things might be different only to find the same old wounds waiting? If you have, tell me below, because your story, your truth, it matters even when no one in your family wants to hear it. What came next shattered my body, but it also forced the truth into the light, and there would be no turning back. I arrived at my parents' house exactly at 2 in the afternoon. It was calculated. If I came too early, I risked being cornered by my father's sharp eye or my mother's subtle critiques. If I came too late, I would endure their punishment of silent glares all night. So I chose precision, 2 o'clock sharp. The driveway was crowded with cars, mostly expensive SUVs and sports cars. Jason's friends were here, the same boys who had mocked me through childhood and now paraded around like men who had earned everything they owned. My stomach knotted when I recognized the red Corvette belonging to Tyler, Jason's closest friend and cruelest accomplice. Inside, my mother greeted me with an air kiss, her eyes scanning me like a scanner at an airport. Blue blouse, dark jeans, flats it passed. Barely. "Audrey, you made it?" she said. Her voice was warm on the surface, but I heard the unspoken relief. She could now boast that the whole family was present. Everyone was already out back, she explained. Jason had just finished opening his presents. I caught a glimpse of the living room table covered with expensive boxes, golf clubs, designer clothes, keys to a new toy, maybe a jet ski. My mother pointed proudly at a photo taped to one of the boxes. "Your father got him the jet ski he's been wanting." For my 30th birthday 6 months earlier, they had mailed me a department store gift card. No phone call, no celebration, just plastic in an envelope. Seeing Jason's pile of luxuries, my throat burned with the familiar sting of inequity. I placed my own gift, a card with $200 inside, on the table. It looked pitiful beside the mountain of extravagance. Walking into the backyard, I felt the atmosphere hit me like heat from the grill. 30 guests lounged on the new pool deck, beers in hand, laughter spilling over the sound of sizzling burgers. My father stood at the grill chest, puffed every flip of a steak, another performance of suburban masculinity. And Jason was the king of the court. Surrounded by his entourage, a beer in one hand, his voice loud and commanding. He had gained weight since I last saw him, the sharpness of his jawline dulled by years of heavy drinking. But the arrogance remained. When he spotted me, his grin widened. "Little sis," he boomed, staggering toward me. "You decided to grace us with your presence." His hug was too tight, too forceful, his strength pressed into me like a threat. "Happy birthday, Jason," I said, slipping free. He gestured grandly to the pool deck. "Cost Dad nearly $20,000. Brazilian hardwood. Nothing but the best." The comparison hung unspoken. Jason deserved only the finest. My needs were always burdens. I moved to get a drink, choosing water. Alcohol was dangerous here. I needed to stay sharp. For the next hour, I mingled with the few spouses and girlfriends who, like me, seemed trapped in a circus they did not enjoy. We formed a quiet alliance on the edge of chaos. But as the sun dipped lower and the beers multiplied, the atmosphere shifted. Jason's voice grew louder, his stories crueler. Soon, the target of his jokes turned, as it always did to me. "Remember when Audrey thought the neighbor's dog had rabies?" he shouted. "She wouldn't leave the house for a week." His friends roared with laughter. My face burned. I was 8 then, terrified of a lie they fed me. Tyler chimed in. Or when we switched her shampoo with hair removal cream, the laughter doubled. I had been 14, forced to wear hats to cover bald patches. My parents called me dramatic. I felt the weight of humiliation again pressing down, suffocating. My throat tightened. I wanted to leave, to vanish, but I forced myself to breathe. Because here's the truth, cruelty never stays hidden forever. And on this night, their laughter was about to end. Before I take you to that moment, let me stop and ask. Have you ever been laughed at by the very people who should have lifted you up, the ones who turned your pain into their entertainment? Share your story with me, not to relive it, but to reclaim it. And while you're here, don't forget to hit subscribe, because in this space, your voice matters. I held my purse tighter, my heart pounding. I had reached my limit. I thought I could escape quietly, but Jason had other plans, and his joke would change the course of my life forever. I clutched my purse, determined to escape. The laughter still echoed behind me, Jason's voice booming above the rest, his friends cackling like an audience at a cruel play. I whispered to myself, "Just get out. Just make it to the car." My therapist's words repeated in my head. "You are an adult. Now you can leave whenever you want." But as I stepped toward the sliding glass doors, Jason staggered in front of me. His body swayed with alcohol, eyes glassy grin wide. Leaving so soon, he slurred, "The party is just getting started." "I have a long drive back," I said, my voice firm. "I need to go." "Come on, sis," he pressed, blocking my path. "One drink, for old time's sake." Old times. To Jason, old times meant torment. It meant laughter at my expense. I shook my head. "No thanks." His smile snapped into a scowl. Still the same uptight Audrey. Some things never change. His words carried that old poison, the same tone he had used since childhood, the tone that told everyone around him that I was the problem, not him. I slipped past him, ignoring the sting of humiliation, and moved toward the deck. The new hardwood boards gleamed under the late afternoon sun. At first glance, they looked beautiful, polished. But as soon as my foot pressed down, something felt wrong. The surface was slick, unnaturally slick. I looked down. The faint sheen caught the light. My stomach dropped. In that instant, I knew. Jason. I tried to steady myself, but it was too late. My foot slid forward, my body lurched back, and time fractured into slow motion. I saw Jason's friends watching, their faces twisted with anticipation, waiting for the show. I saw my father glance over from the grill, irritation etched across his face. I saw my mother pause mid-sentence, her lips pursed. Then came the impact. My lower back struck the concrete edge of the pool, followed instantly by my head. Pain exploded like fireworks behind my eyes. Then silence. My scream broke that silence, sharp and ragged, but what terrified me most wasn't the pain. It was the absence of it. I couldn't feel my legs. I lay there gasping, eyes wide against the blinding sky. My arms flailed, but from the waist down there was nothing. No sensation, no movement. A void where my body should have been. "Help," I choked out, my voice trembling. "Please, I can't feel my legs." Jason leaned over me, smirking. "Nice pratfall, sis. Very dramatic. Always the theater kid." His words sliced deeper than the impact. "I'm serious," I cried, panic rising. I hit my back. "I can't move my legs. Call an ambulance." By now people had gathered around, but no one moved. Their eyes flicked between Jason's smirk and my father's scowl. They took their cues from them, as they always had. My father pushed through the crowd. "What's going on?" His tone wasn't worried, it was annoyed. I fell, I sobbed. "I can't feel my legs. I need a hospital." He shook his head. "For God's sake, the deck is perfectly safe. Walk it off. Stop being a baby. You're making a scene." My mother knelt beside me, her voice a hiss meant only for me. "Enough. You've always been jealous of Jason, but this is too far. You're ruining his birthday." Her words crushed me. Even now, when my body was broken, they saw performance, not pain. I tried again, weaker this time. "Please, please help me. Something's wrong." But Jason had already turned away. My father went back to the grill. My mother adjusted her blouse, whispering excuses to the guests. I was left alone, paralyzed on the ground, as the world blurred and my breath grew shallow. Why, let me pause here and ask you, have you ever begged for help only to be told you were exaggerating? Have you ever had your truth dismissed until you doubted it yourself? If you have, share it in the comments. Because sometimes saying it out loud is the first step toward healing. I thought I was going to die there, not from the fall, but from being abandoned by the people who should have rushed to save me. But fate, or maybe mercy, had other plans. Because in the next moment, a stranger's voice cut through the noise. A voice that refused to dismiss me. A voice that would change everything. The world tilted above me. My vision pulsed in and out the sky, spinning like a carousel I couldn't get off. Sweat poured down my face, though the air was cooling with the evening. My fingers tingled, my chest heaved, but my legs were still gone. Then a voice, firm, steady, cutting through the haze. "Excuse me, I'm a nurse. Let me through." The crowd shifted. A woman I didn't recognize knelt beside me. She had kind eyes, her hands confident as they pressed against my wrist. "Hi there, I'm Rachel. I work in the ER at Massachusetts General. Can you tell me your name?" "Louise," I whispered, my teeth chattering. "Okay, Louise, I need you to stay still. Don't move. Can you tell me what happened?" I forced out the words, fall, impact, numbness. She nodded, her face tightening. She pressed her fingers against my legs. "Do you feel this?" "No." "Can you wiggle your toes?" I tried. Nothing. Rachel's eyes sharpened. "She needs an ambulance," she said, already pulling out her phone. "She doesn't need that," my mother snapped, appearing suddenly. "She just needs to get up and stop making a fuss." Rachel didn't flinch. Her voice was steel. "Ma'am, your daughter has signs of a spinal cord injury. Moving her could cause permanent damage. She needs emergency medical attention immediately." For the first time that night, I saw a flicker of fear in my mother's eyes. Spinal cord injury. That's impossible. She just slipped. Rachel shook her head. Falls are one of the most common causes of spinal injuries, and she hit the concrete edge hard. While she spoke to the dispatcher, my father stormed over. "What is all this about an ambulance?" Rachel didn't back down. "Sir, your daughter has potentially suffered a serious spinal injury. Paramedics will be here in about 10 minutes. Until then, do not move her." For the first time, my father's face paled. He glanced at me, then back at Rachel, then at the sheen on the deck where I had fallen. His denial faltered, but only for a moment. "This is ridiculous," he muttered. Rachel wasn't listening. She ran her fingers across the wood, then rubbed them together. Her eyes narrowed. "This isn't water. This feels like oil." All eyes turned to Jason. His smirk evaporated, his face drained of color. "It was just a joke," he stammered. I poured some deck oil on the boards. "I thought she'd slip a little, maybe fall in the pool. I didn't think—" His voice trailed off, shame finally creeping in. The silence that followed was heavy. For the first time in years, my family had no words to excuse him. I lay on the ground, staring up at the woman kneeling beside me, the only person who seemed to see me as human, not dramatic. And for the first time, I felt something like hope. Now let me ask you, have you ever had a stranger defend you when your own family wouldn't? Someone who saw your truth when those closest to you refused? Tell me in the comments, because sometimes the people who save us aren't the ones we expect. They're the ones we meet in the darkest moments. Rachel squeezed my hand. "Stay calm, Louise. Help is on the way." The sound of sirens pierced the air, growing louder, cutting through the stunned silence of the backyard. Guests began to drift away, not wanting to be part of what was unfolding. My father stood frozen, my mother fussed with her clothes. Jason's eyes locked on the ground. But me, I held on to Rachel's voice. Because she was the first person in my life who looked at me and said without hesitation, "I believe you." And that belief was about to change everything. The sirens cut through the air like a blade. They grew louder, closer, until the flashing lights painted the street outside my parents' house in red and blue. Guests shifted uneasily, some slipping away through the side gate. No one wanted to be tied to the scene that was unfolding. Rachel never left my side. She monitored my pulse, kept my head still, and spoke in a steady voice that anchored me against the storm of fear building in my chest. "Breathe with me, Louise. In and out. You're not alone. Help is here." The paramedics burst through the gate with a stretcher and gear in hand. The lead medic, a woman named Sarah, knelt beside me. "Hello, Louise. We're going to take good care of you. Can you tell me where it hurts most?" "My back," I gasped, "and my head, but I can't feel my legs." Sarah nodded, professional and calm. She fitted a cervical collar around my neck. "We'll keep you stable. Don't try to move." Her colleagues prepared a backboard. Rachel filled them in quickly, impact to the pool edge, immediate paralysis, evidence of oil on the deck. When Sarah heard the word oil, she froze. Deliberately? Rachel's jaw clenched. Her brother admitted it. Sarah turned, her eyes hardening as they landed on Jason. "Sir, is that true?" Jason shifted on his feet, his hands stuffed into his pockets. "It was just supposed to be a prank," he muttered. "I didn't mean—" Sarah cut him off with a sharp look. "Mike," she called to her colleague, "document the surface." Mike crouched by the board, snapping photos, collecting samples. My father stepped forward angrily. "This is unnecessary. It was an accident." Sarah didn't even glance at him. "Sir, creating a hazard that results in serious injury is not an accident. It is reckless endangerment." Her words rang in the air like a verdict. My mother clasped her hands, wringing them, her eyes darting to the neighbors peeking over fences. Always worried about appearances, always pretending. The medics moved quickly, preparing to roll me. On my count, Sarah instructed, 1, 2, 3. Even with their practiced precision, the pain was blinding, ripping through my spine like fire. I cried out, unable to stop the sound. "I know, Louise," Sarah soothed. "Stay with me. We'll give you something for the pain soon." Strapped to the backboard, I felt smaller than ever, just a body on a stretcher, my independence stripped away in an instant. Oxygen hissed through the mask they placed over my face, an IV needle slid into my arm. My blood pressure was dropping, my heart rate climbing. Through the blur, I caught sight of Jason. For once, he wasn't smirking. He was pale, staring at the deck, as if the truth itself had finally cornered him. My father argued with Mike near the grill, his voice sharp, his face red. My mother adjusted her blouse again and again, desperate to look composed. And me, I was being wheeled through the house, out the front door toward the ambulance, waiting with its doors open, like a mouth ready to swallow me whole. I need to stop here and ask you something. Have you ever watched the mask finally slip off someone who always seemed untouchable, the moment when the truth breaks through their lies? Tell me below, because sharing those moments reminds us that cruelty does not stay hidden forever. As the stretcher slid into the ambulance, I caught one last glimpse of my family, Jason rooted in place, my father still arguing, my mother hugging herself, eyes darting, and then another set of lights. A police cruiser pulled into the driveway, silent but undeniable. For the first time in my life, I felt something like justice, breathing down on the people who had silenced me for so long. And even through the pain, I thought, this time, they can't walk away. The ambulance doors slammed shut, drowning out the noise of the backyard. For the first time all day, Jason's laughter, my father's barking. My mother's whispers, they were gone. All I could hear was the steady beep of monitors and the calm voices of professionals who finally treated me as more than dramatic background noise. Sarah leaned over me. "Louise, you're stable for now. We're taking you to Massachusetts General. Stay calm, focus on your breathing." The IV line burned slightly in my arm, a strange reminder that my body was still mine, even if half of it refused to respond. But my thoughts spun faster than the wheels beneath us. Jason had admitted it. He poured oil on the deck. My parents had tried to bury my cries beneath accusations of jealousy, and now sirens and flashing lights had carried me away. Was this finally the moment when the lies collapsed? The ride felt endless. My back throbbed, my head pounded, and every second stretched into eternity. I stared at the ceiling, repeating the words Rachel had whispered earlier. "You're not alone. Help is here." When we arrived, a swarm of hands transferred me from the stretcher to a hospital bed. Bright lights blinded me, voices layered over one another, nurses calling out vitals, a doctor asking questions, machines buzzing. They stabilized me, scanned me, and prepped me for surgery before I could fully process what was happening. Hours later, when consciousness drifted back, I found myself in a quiet hospital room. A nurse introduced himself, Carlos. He explained I had been in and out for 12 hours. My throat was raw from a breathing tube. My back ached. But worse was the weight of uncertainty. Would I ever walk again? That answer came from Dr. Martinez, a neurosurgeon with silver hair tied neatly back. She sat beside my bed, showing me images from my MRI. "You suffered an incomplete spinal cord injury at the T12 level. 2 fractured vertebrae compressed your spinal cord. We removed bone fragments and stabilized your spine with rods and screws." My breath caught. "Will I walk again?" Her eyes were kind but firm. "It's too soon to know. Because the injury is incomplete, there's hope. Some patients regain significant mobility, others recover less. A lot depends on therapy and time." Her words balanced between comfort and devastation. I had entered that party walking. I left strapped to a board, staring down a future defined by paralysis. All because of a prank. all because my family refused to believe me. Then she said something that pierced deeper than any scalpel. Delays in treatment can make outcomes worse. In cases like yours, every minute counts. The truth slammed into me. If my parents had called for help immediately, if they had treated me as real instead of dramatic, my prognosis might have been different. Their neglect wasn't just cruel, it might have stolen my chance at recovery. Tears spilled down my cheeks. The pain of my body was unbearable, but the betrayal, that was a wound no surgery could fix. I need to pause here because this is where my story turns from tragedy to reckoning. Have you ever faced the moment when you realized people you trusted didn't just fail you, they made everything worse? If you have, tell me in the comments. And if you're new here, subscribe. This channel is about stories that expose the truth and remind us we are not alone. Because as I lay there broken but alive, I learned something. Jason's prank didn't end with me on the ground. My parents' neglect didn't vanish with sirens. The story wasn't over. Police officers were waiting to speak to me. Charges were already being filed. And for the first time, the Matthews family was no longer untouchable. What happened next would take my suffering from private shame to public reckoning, and the consequences would be far greater than I imagined. The knock on the hospital door was soft, but the authority behind it was unmistakable. Two women stepped in, Detective Sullivan and Officer Chen. Their presence filled the sterile room with a gravity I hadn't felt before. They weren't here to dismiss me. They weren't here to protect Jason or soothe my parents' pride. They were here for the truth. Louise, Detective Sullivan said gently, pulling a chair to my bedside. We know this is difficult, but we need to ask you some questions about what happened. I nodded, my throat dry. Carlos, the nurse, hovered close, as if to remind me I wasn't alone. I told them everything. Arriving at the party, Jason's forced hug, his mocking stories that cut deeper than the laughter around him, my attempt to leave, the slick deck, the fall, the searing pain replaced by terrifying numbness, and then the worst betrayal, my parents calling me dramatic, telling me to get up, accusing me of ruining Jason's birthday. So to be clear, Officer Chen said, pen scratching across her notebook, you reported loss of movement in your legs immediately after the fall, but no one called for medical help until a guest intervened. Yes, I whispered. My voice trembled, but not from uncertainty. That nurse Rachel, she was the only one who believed me. Without her, I don't think I'd be alive right now. And your brother, Detective Sullivan, pressed. I swallowed hard. He admitted it. He said he poured oil on the deck as a prank. He wanted me to slip into the pool. He didn't think... My words faltered. He didn't think I'd hit the concrete. The detectives exchanged glances, not of doubt, but of grim confirmation. We've already taken statements from witnesses, Detective Sullivan explained. Rachel Cooper, the nurse, and the paramedics both reported your brother's admission. We also collected samples from the deck that confirmed the presence of deck oil. Jason Matthews was taken into custody last night on charges of reckless endangerment resulting in serious bodily harm. My chest rose sharply. I had dreamed of this moment my entire life, someone finally holding him accountable. And yet the words landed with both relief and grief. This was my brother, my blood. The boy who once built Lego towers with me before he learned to tear me down. Detective Sullivan wasn't finished. Your parents, Douglas and Eleanor Matthews, are being investigated for negligence and failure to provide necessary medical assistance. Their refusal to seek help after your fall may have worsened your condition. I stared at the white sheets, my eyes blurring. My parents could face criminal charges, jail. For a lifetime they had ignored my pain. Now the law called it what it was, neglect. Could they really go to prison? I asked, my voice almost childlike. That will be up to the courts, Detective Sullivan replied evenly. But yes, these are serious charges. Silence stretched between us. I realized something then. Justice didn't feel clean. It felt heavy. It carried weight in both hands, truth and heartbreak. After the detectives left, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling. No one from my family had visited or called. Whether it was by legal advice or by choice, the silence was total. For the first time, I was certain of something I had always feared. They never intended to protect me. They never would. Mike. Now let me pause because this is where I want to hear from you. What do you think? Should family loyalty protect someone from facing justice? Or should truth come first, even when it means tearing your family apart? Comment below, because these choices are never easy, but your perspective might be exactly what someone else needs to hear. Lying there, I felt the sting of abandonment, but also a spark of something new. The world finally saw me, not as dramatic, not as weak, but as a woman wronged. And soon that recognition would not only come from the police. The courts, the lawyers, even the insurance companies, everyone was about to be pulled into a fight that would define the rest of my life. The Matthews family could no longer hide behind appearances. Their golden image was cracking, and I was determined not to be silent anymore. The days that followed blurred into a haze of IV drips, fluorescent lights, and whispered updates from doctors. But one moment stands out, as sharp as glass, the conversation where reality finally sank its claws into me. Dr. Martinez came into my room with a tablet in her hands. She pulled up my MRI scans, those ghostly images of bone and cord. "Louise," she began gently, "the surgery stabilized your spine, but the damage is significant. You have what we classify as an incomplete spinal cord injury at the T12 level. That means the cord wasn't completely severed. There's hope for recovery, but we don't know how much." Her words were both a lifeline and a weight dragging me under. "So I might walk again." She nodded. "Some patients regain significant function with therapy, others less so. A lot depends on your healing process and the intensity of rehabilitation. But right now, you're experiencing paraplegia, paralysis of your lower body." The word paralyzed hung in the room like smoke. I tried to imagine my future me, a teacher running after children at recess, standing at the board pacing the classroom, gone. What about if my parents had called sooner, if they hadn't told me to walk it off? The question burst out of me like a wound that had been festering. Dr. Martinez didn't soften her response. "Every minute counts with spinal cord injuries. It's impossible to say with certainty, but yes, delays can worsen outcomes." The betrayal hit me harder than the fall. My brother's prank had broken my body, but my parents' denial might have sealed my fate. That night I cried until sleep dragged me under. Not just for what I had lost, but for the truth I could no longer ignore. My family's neglect wasn't just emotional anymore. It had crossed into the physical, into the criminal. The next morning I awoke to the soft knock of a hospital social worker. Marcus introduced himself, explaining his role. He talked about rehabilitation centers, home modifications, disability benefits, words that made my head spin. "This is a long road," he said kindly. "You're looking at weeks in inpatient rehab, followed by months, maybe years of outpatient therapy." "I live alone," I whispered. "My apartment has stairs. I teach elementary school. I'm on my feet all day. How can I live like this?" Marcus met my eyes steadily. "You won't be alone. We'll build a plan. You'll learn new ways to navigate. It's overwhelming now, but it won't always feel this way." Still, the enormity crushed me. I felt small, broken, drifting in a future I didn't want. And then came the legal storm. A woman named Laura Jensen, an assistant district attorney, arrived 10 days after my fall. She laid out the charges with clinical precision. Jason felony, reckless endangerment, potential prison. My parents' criminal negligence and failure to provide medical assistance. Up to 5 years, depending on the court. I listened numb. Jason, the golden child in prison. My parents who had spent their lives perfecting appearances, facing public disgrace. It felt like a nightmare and a strange kind of justice colliding at once. Laura didn't stop there. She mentioned civil lawsuits, damages the cost of spinal cord injuries, stretching into millions over a lifetime. I could barely process it. How do you put a price tag on a body, on betrayal? After she left, I stared at the ceiling, my heart heavy. Justice might come, but it would not erase the damage. It would not give me my legs back. Oi, let me turn this to you. Do you think justice ever truly balances the scales? Can a courtroom verdict heal wounds carved by family? I want to hear your thoughts in the comments. Because sometimes the hardest part of healing isn't the injury. It's the silence that follows, when justice still feels incomplete. As the weeks went on, the reality grew sharper. My body had changed forever. My family's facade had shattered. And yet, inside that hospital, I found a fragile truth. This was the beginning of my fight back. Not just against paralysis, against silence itself. 2 weeks after the fall, I was transferred from acute care to a rehabilitation center. The hospital had become a blur of antiseptic air and constant alarms, but rehab was different. It wasn't about survival anymore. It was about building whatever life I had left. The facility was modern, almost too bright with hallways that echoed the squeak of wheelchairs. My primary therapist was David, a man with steady optimism that sometimes irritated me, but more often kept me from collapsing into despair. Our job, he told me on the first day, isn't just to help you move again. It's to teach you how to live again. Therapy was brutal. Mornings began with hours of stretching learning transfer techniques, strapping into braces that forced my body to remember what it once knew. Every motion sent fire through my back. Afternoons were occupational therapy cooking from a wheelchair dressing myself, practicing the small daily tasks that suddenly felt like climbing mountains. But perhaps the hardest part was the silence from my family. Days turned into weeks, and not one of them called or visited. Jason was in jail awaiting trial. My parents under investigation hid behind lawyers. They had spent their whole lives perfecting appearances. But when the truth cracked open, they vanished. I told myself I didn't care. But late at night, staring at the ceiling of that rehab room, I felt the ache of abandonment. Even broken love is still love, and losing it cut deep. Not everyone abandoned me, though. My colleagues from school organized a fundraiser, showing up with casseroles and handmade cards from my students. They reminded me that family isn't always blood. Sometimes it's the people who show up when the world falls apart. Then one evening, a visitor arrived I didn't expect. Laura Jensen, the assistant district attorney, stepped into my room with a folder in her hands. "The police investigation is complete," she said. "We're filing formal charges." Jason faced up to 10 years in prison. My parents up to 5. I listened, my chest tight. Justice was coming. But it was the civil lawsuit that startled me most. A personal injury lawyer, Michael Greenberg, visited the next day. He explained calmly but firmly that medical expenses for spinal cord injuries often reach millions over a lifetime. "We'll file against your parents' homeowner's insurance." First, he said, but given Jason's admission and your parents' negligence, we may need to pursue their personal assets too. The words churned in my stomach. Sue my own parents, take their house, their savings. Even after everything, part of me recoiled. Michael placed his hand gently on the table. "This isn't revenge, Louise. It's survival. You deserve resources to live independently to pay for your care. This is about giving you a future." I wanted to argue, but I knew he was right. My parents had taken so much already, my voice, my safety, maybe even my chance to walk again. If they had to pay to repair what they broke, wasn't that justice too? That night I sat by the window, staring out at the city lights, feeling the weight of it all. My family wasn't just fractured, it was collapsing under the weight of truth. Jason would be sentenced. My parents would face courtrooms. And I, once the invisible dramatic child, was now the witness who held the key. And here's where I want to draw you in. What would you do in my place? Would you sue your own parents if it meant survival? Or would you let them keep their life while you struggled with the pieces of yours? Tell me in the comments. And don't go anywhere, because what happened next brought the kind of twist I never thought I'd face. Because sometimes the greatest shock isn't that your family hurt you, it's that strangers, people you never expected, step in to give you back the pieces of yourself you thought were lost forever. 3 months after the fall, I wheeled myself into a courtroom for the first time. The air was thick with tension, the kind that settles when family secrets are dragged into public light. Jason sat at the defense table, hands cuffed, eyes down. He looked smaller than I had ever seen him, as if the arrogance had been stripped away with the expensive clothes and the crowd of friends who once cheered him on. My parents sat behind him. My father's jaw was clenched, his posture rigid. My mother fidgeted with her pearls, her eyes darting toward the gallery every few seconds, desperate to see who was watching. Even here, in a room where their daughter's life had been ripped apart, appearances mattered more than truth. The prosecutor laid out the case with sharp precision. Witnesses confirmed Jason's admission about the oil. Photos showed the sheen on the deck, the samples of lubricant collected. The paramedics testified about my condition, how every minute without medical attention worsened the risk. And Rachel, dear Rachel, spoke firmly about what she had seen, about the moment she realized I was paralyzed, and how my parents tried to silence her. When my turn came, I rolled to the front. My hands trembled as I adjusted the microphone. "My name is Louise," I said, my voice shaking at first, then growing stronger. "I am 28 years old. I went to my brother's birthday party able to walk. I left unable to move my legs. This isn't just about a prank. This is about years of cruelty dismissed, years of pain silenced. And when I needed them most, my family told me to walk it off." I could see my father's face tighten, my mother's lips press thin. Jason wouldn't look at me, but the jury did. They saw me. In the end, Jason accepted a plea deal. 5 years, 2 in prison, 3 on probation. My parents received probation and hundreds of hours of community service. To the world, it was justice. To me, it was complicated. No sentence could give me back what I lost. No verdict could heal the invisible wounds. But the civil case was different. Michael Greenberg, my attorney, pushed harder. Depositions forced my parents to speak under oath, to admit their choices, their neglect. After months of negotiations, their insurance paid out the maximum. They sold their house, liquidated savings, and created a trust for my care. $3 million in total money that would cover medical bills, modifications, equipment, and the future I never asked for. It was victory and heartbreak both at once. I didn't want their money. I wanted their love. But money was all they had ever given Jason freely. Maybe in the end this was their only language of acknowledgement. When the settlement was finalized, I left the courthouse feeling both lighter and heavier. Lighter because for once the truth wasn't buried. Heavier because no verdict could rewrite the past. So, before I take you to the next chapter, I want to pause. What do you think is justice about punishment or about reparation? Do you believe money can ever balance what love failed to give? Share your thoughts below, and if this story speaks to you, subscribe. Because this space is where we break the silence together. Back at the rehab center, David smiled when I told him the case was over. Now he said we focus on you, on what you can still build. His words reminded me my story didn't end with the courtroom. It was just beginning. Because surviving wasn't enough. I needed to learn how to live again. And that journey, the one after justice, was about to test me in ways even my family never could. 8 months after the fall, I was discharged from the rehabilitation center. By then, I could take a few labored steps with heavy braces and a walker. It wasn't walking the way I remembered. It was slow, stiff, a reminder of everything I had lost. But to the doctors and therapists, it was remarkable progress. I returned to my apartment, now transformed. Doorways widened, ramps, installed the bathroom, remodeled for accessibility. It didn't feel like the same home, but it was a place where I could start over. A caregiver came part-time, helping with what I still couldn't manage alone. For the first time in months, I could sleep in my own bed. Yet independence felt both sweet and bitter. Sweet because I had fought for it. Bitter because I hadn't chosen any of this. Teaching in a classroom was impossible, but the school district surprised me. They offered me a position as a curriculum specialist, a role I could do mostly from home, developing materials for teachers and occasionally visiting schools. It was a lifeline, proof that my career wasn't over, that my identity wasn't erased. At the rehab center, I had met others like me, people who lived with spinal cord injuries. Some were years into their journey, moving with wheelchairs as if they were extensions of their bodies. Others like me were still raw, still grappling with the loss. One woman, Tara, had been injured in a car accident. She told me something that stayed with me. "It doesn't get easier, you just get stronger." Her words echoed each time frustration clawed at me, when my hands fumbled with buttons, when spasms jolted me awake at night, when I stared at my legs and begged them to move. But the greatest healing didn't come from therapy. It came from letting myself feel the truth: my family had failed me. For years, I clung to hope that maybe one day they'd see me, love me, protect me. That hope had paralyzed me long before the accident ever did. In losing them, I gained clarity. Claire, my trauma therapist, helped me untangle that knot. Louise, she said in one session, you were conditioned to doubt your pain. That doubt is still with you, but you don't need their acknowledgement to validate your reality. Your story is yours. Hearing that felt like oxygen. It freed me from the invisible leash of their approval. My healing wasn't about reconciliation. It was about reclaiming myself. Friends became my family. Colleagues checked in weekly, bringing meals, or just sitting with me. My students' parents sent cards telling me how much I had impacted their children. And the disability community welcomed me with open arms, showing me what resilience looked like when life takes away what you thought you couldn't live without. I learned to drive again, this time with hand controls. The first time I pulled onto the highway, music blasting through the speakers, wind on my face, I cried. It wasn't freedom like before, but it was freedom all the same. And slowly I began to see that what I lost had carved space for something new, strength, clarity, connection. My family had abandoned me, but life had handed me a different kind of family, one made of choice, not obligation. So let me turn this to you. Have you ever had to redefine what family means? Have you discovered that those who stand by you in the storm are the ones who truly deserve the word? Tell me in the comments, because your story might help someone else let go of the people who will never change. 2 years after that backyard fall, I had scars, braces, and a body that worked differently. But I also had peace. I knew who I was, who I could trust, and who I no longer needed. And just when I thought the story was over, a letter arrived from Jason in prison, an apology I never expected. But whether I would let him back into my life, that was a decision I wasn't ready to make. 2 years had passed since the fall that rewrote my life. I had adapted to ramps and braces, to therapy sessions and long nights of pain. I had rebuilt myself from the ashes of betrayal. Yet nothing prepared me for the moment I found a letter waiting on my kitchen table, one stamped with the return address of a state prison. It was from Jason. For 3 days I couldn't bring myself to open it. I stared at the envelope, my chest-heavy hands trembling each time I picked it up. Part of me wanted to shred it without a glance. Another part, the younger sister who had once begged for his approval, needed to know what he had to say. On the third night I tore it open. The letter was handwritten, shaky, but legible. He apologized. For the prank, for the years of cruelty, for the countless times he made me feel worthless. He wrote about the therapy sessions in prison, about facing his own demons for the first time. He admitted he had been a bully, a coward who leaned on the shield of being the golden child. And for once, he made no excuses. I understand if you never forgive me, the letter ended. I wouldn't blame you. But I needed you to know you deserved so much better, and I'm sorry. I sat in silence, tears streaking down my cheeks. The words felt genuine, but I couldn't ignore the ache. An apology didn't erase the years of torment, or the concrete lip of the pool, or the wheelchair in my living room. It didn't heal the scar of parents who chose him over me every single time. My parents never reached out. I heard through distant relatives that they had moved to Florida, telling neighbors a polished story about a tragic accident, never admitting the truth. They painted themselves as devoted parents, caring for a broken daughter. It was the Matthews way. Protect the image, deny the reality. But by then, their narrative no longer mattered. Because I had built a new one. I had finished a master's degree in educational psychology, focusing on trauma-informed teaching. I had begun consulting for school districts, training teachers to recognize and support children carrying invisible wounds like mine once were. And I found myself working with advocacy groups, visiting rehab centers, to mentor newly injured patients. Each time I looked into the eyes of someone just beginning their journey, I told them what Tara once told me. It doesn't get easier. You get stronger. And then there was Thomas, a physical therapist who had walked beside me through countless exercises, who never saw me as fragile or broken. What began as professional encouragement grew into friendship, and then something more. With him, I learned what love could feel like when it was rooted in respect, not power. He never asked me to be smaller, quieter, or tougher than I was. He simply asked me to be me. Looking back, I realized the fall hadn't just paralyzed me, it had freed me. It forced me to shed illusions I might have carried for decades. My parents' approval, Jason's validation, the performance of being the good daughter, all of it shattered that day. And from the wreckage, I discovered a version of myself that was stronger, clearer, and finally free. Bye. And now I want to speak directly to you. Have you ever held on to someone's apology and wondered if it was enough? Have you struggled to decide if letting them back in would heal you or break you all over again? Share your story in the comments because your words may give courage to someone else standing at the same crossroads. And if you followed me this far, subscribe for more stories like this, because healing is never easy, but none of us should do it alone. I don't know if I'll ever see Jason again. Maybe one day, maybe never. But I know this: my life is no longer defined by their choices. It's defined by mine. And the greatest choice I've made is to keep moving forward, even if every step is slower, heavier, harder than before, because each one belongs to me. The story I've shared with you isn't just about a cruel prank or a broken family. It's about what happens when silence is forced on someone for so long that even their pain is dismissed as theater. My journey began on a pool deck, slick with oil, but it didn't end there. It carried me through operating rooms, courtrooms, rehab centers, and sleepless nights, where I questioned whether life could ever hold joy again. And here's what I've learned: healing is not a straight line. It bends, it stumbles, it pulls you back before it pushes you forward. Some days I wake up strong, grateful for how far I've come. Other days I still grieve what I lost: the ease of walking the family I once hoped would love me differently, the safety I thought I had in this world. Both truths live inside me, and that's okay. But here's the gift hidden inside the wreckage: resilience. I discovered that strength doesn't come from never being broken. It comes from choosing to rebuild anyway. From finding family and friends who stay when it's hard. From redefining love not as blind loyalty, but as compassion and truth. If you take one thing from my story, let it be this: you deserve to be believed. Your pain is real. Your story matters. And no matter how badly others have failed you, there are people in this world who will see you, hear you, and stand by you. I didn't choose what happened to me, but I chose what I would do with it. And that choice, my choice, is the truest form of freedom I've ever known.